I'm Jakob von Uexküll. I'm the founder of the Right Livelihood Award, which is often known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. And I'm here in Copenhagen mainly on behalf of another organization I founded a few years ago called the World Future Council. The idea is that we have some huge gaps in existing global institutions, and one is that we don't have anybody speaking up for the rights of future generations. Now, our ancestors had that. Among native North Americans, of course, there was the principle of the seventh generation, that you had to look at the impact of every decision you took onto the next 7 generations to come. In West Africa, they had a similar principle, and in Asia, in India, they actually had bodies called Councils of Seers into the Future, which had a sort of veto power over the day-to-day decisions. But they could impact the future much less than we can today. But we have this enormous impact on future generations, both globally, much more than before, and much longer term, but we don't have anybody speaking out for their rights and interests. And so this is one purpose of the World Future Council. And it doesn't just do that by saying, here are some people coming together. We have about 40 councillors who are selected after a worldwide consultation process. But you look at laws of nature, you look at the laws of science, of the natural sciences, and then you can see that certain things are endangering future generations. If you do bottom trawling, then you know that our children and grandchildren aren't going to have any fish to eat. So it's very clear that this is something which really should be banned, which should be taboo, which should be criminalized. And so that, in a way, is sort of the stick approach of the World Future Council. It deals with lawyers. We had a hearing in The Hague with top judges and prosecutors from the various international courts there, looking at how we can criminalize crimes against future generations. We're doing a book on this, which is coming out next year, the Cambridge University Press, on the principles of future justice. My colleague, Dr. Maya Goebel, who is working on that, is also here with me in Copenhagen. And the carrot approach to match the stick approach is our focus on best policy implementation and spreading of best policies worldwide. Because there are solutions available, and many people work on individual solutions. What can I do as a consumer, producer, entrepreneur, parent, citizen, whatever? And that's great, but it's not going to be enough. Whatever we do as individuals is not going to be enough. It's going to be too little, too late, unless we have the right laws and institutions and regulations in place. And to most people, this of course is pretty boring. Martin Luther King once said that laws don't move the heart, but they restrain the heartless. And today we really need to work hard to restrain the heartless. So what we did was, rather than starting from scratch and inventing new laws, we looked at good laws which are working, and we started with climate because of course it's now the overriding global threat in so many areas. So we said, what do we need to do? And we realized that we have these enormous amounts of renewable energy every day, which are being wasted, because if you don't use the sunshine of today to the maximum extent possible, you have wasted it. And this is an enormous capital destruction, because you can't use the sun of today anymore tomorrow. Same with the wind and other renewable resources. So we looked at what is the best law worldwide to spread renewable energy as quickly as possible. And we found that wherever there is a grid, which is about half the world's population have access to the grid, it is the so-called feed-in tariff, which basically gives people who produce their own renewable energy a guaranteed income over 20 years. It was created in Germany, it's spread to Spain, it's now in 40 countries and regions, and basically you give them investment security. The electricity companies are obliged to buy the solar and wind, etc. energy they produce off them at a set price which guarantees them an income, guarantees them a profit. And the total cost, because of course they pay more than the current odds, because as we know, fossil fuels are subsidized, so it's not a fair market. The total costs are then spread over all the consumers of this electricity company, and that works. The costs are pretty small, a few dollars a month probably at most in Germany. And so we then have created a website where any politician, any lawmaker can look at how this law works and how it's been designed in these 40 countries and regions, and how they can adapt it to their own country, to their own needs. And basically it's like they have building blocks. You can build together the best feed-in tariff legislation for your own country. Feed-in tariff. Now, obviously in the US we don't call it that because people don't like tariffs. So we presented it first in the US under the slogan "Power to the People." And we now talk about rewarding renewables. And interestingly enough, thanks to the work of the World Future Council, feed-in tariff legislation has now been introduced in the state of Hawaii. It's been introduced in Florida, in the city of Gainesville, and we're working with a number of other US state governments and also on the federal level to promote this kind of legislation. We have got it introduced in South Africa, in Western Australia, in the UK, and a number of other countries, because we hold hearings with experts and parliamentarians all over the world. We find that quite often, instead of parliamentarians coming, the ministers come, and the president and even the prime minister and the president in Guyana, when we held the hearing there, came. We had one in the Pacific recently. We hold them all over the world. So this has been our main work, the climate energy work and the future justice work. But we're also expanding. We're looking at finance, future finance. How can we have financial regulations and which serve the real economy instead of threatening it? We're looking at agriculture, at cities. We have a couple of small commissions there. It's really, for what it's trying to do globally, it's completely underfunded, but I just felt we had to start doing it. So we're doing it, and we're now here in Copenhagen presenting a couple of our proposals, including one to create new money, breaking the funding deadlock by creating new money to fund the campaign for climate justice and climate security. So basically what you do is you use existing mechanisms like the so-called special drawing rights of the International Monetary Fund. You use the public realization now since the banking crisis that governments can create new money, and you just go ahead and build these wind generators and fund them. And you don't have to, there's no need to repay it. You have created some new wealth. Money is not the real problem. This is a sort of a dogma that we are short of money. Now, in any society, if you have the spare capacity, what the economists call the output gap, which we now have. We have a massive output gap. We have so many unused productive facilities. We have so many people who are unemployed. So if you just put them to work, it's not inflationary, because inflation means that you have too much money chasing too few goods. But if you only introduce new money when you're actually producing new goods, producing new wealth, so you have money against performance in a way, then it's not inflationary. So this is a way to move away from this blockage, which is really an artificial blockage. And then we arrive at real blockages. There are going to be some problems in expanding photovoltaic solar energy massively, for example, because there are some rare minerals like gallium and indium. We have to find substitutes for, we have to find more of them. But these are real challenges. Money is not a challenge. Money is a human creation, and we can redesign our monetary system in such a way that it serves us. We must get away from this current monetary correctness and make sure that we cannot afford, as civilized human beings, we cannot afford to have a world where there is huge amounts of money. Money can, as I said, can be created, and we have children dying of hunger and preventable diseases. Which we could, with the stroke of a pen, by changing our rules of credit and money creation, we could help them, we could save them. And this is something we really, as civilized people, we now have, I think, realized that the old system is not working. It's promised that all this would happen, wealth would trickle down. It hasn't trickled down. In fact, people are being threatened now by climate chaos, and therefore we have to redesign all the systems to face and adapt and serve this new world and create a world of climate justice and climate security. And this is what the World Future Council is primarily working on. I think we need an organic agricultural revolution. It's been quite clear since the famous MIT study a couple of years ago that you can feed the world with organic agriculture. And I think now there's another reason, for shifting that way, because otherwise we are not just going to contribute to climate chaos and climate collapse. We're also facing, not just peak oil, but peak phosphate. The current way of running our agriculture just is not sustainable. And we have just done a study on this shift, and are actually at this very moment holding a meeting here in Copenhagen on this subject. I think we are facing a growing gap between words and deeds, and I think this is leading to an increasing cynicism about the arrogance of power. I think you see this in sort of police state methods, which Denmark, which used to be a tolerant country, has used to deal with peaceful demonstrators, with mass arrests for people who haven't done anything, and only 4 out of 200 are then charged. I mean, the percentages is ridiculous. You see it in the way civil society has been handled at this conference, where they are left to queue for 5, 6, 7 hours out in the cold, even after they have got accreditation, and then are sort of let in and expelled again from the conference center in complete arbitrary ways, with needing new passes to come in every day, and then needing to pass a sort of I don't know how many different controls, and today and tomorrow, of course, no civil society organizations at all are allowed close to the Bella Center, where these where the heads of government are meeting, where the conference is going on. So I think this shows a sort of growing divide, even in democratic countries, between the rulers and the ruled, between citizens and their governments, and an increasing anger, from citizens that there is no sign of a realization that this is a global emergency. Although politicians talk about this being a global emergency, when you actually read the protocol of the petty arguments and discussions so far, it is actually quite scandalous. And the hope now that President Obama will, save it all in the last minute, I think is, be sort of slightly naive. I think that, that you need a much broader coalition of people willing to take, courageous steps, so people willing to show political will. I think the rich countries are still trying to get away from the fact that they have polluted the global atmospheric commons and they have to pay for it. And the amounts are not small, because unless we want the poor countries to continue our development path, which is going to destroy the planet for all of us, we have to compensate them for the fact that we have taken away more than their fair share of the global atmospheric commons. I do think the poor countries are making a strategic mistake by just refusing to agree to any binding cuts. I think they should agree to binding cuts in return and say quite clearly what the price should be. Then the whole thing would be clearer, and everybody would know where the blame is. And this is, of course, why we produced this proposal to create new money, because we realize at the moment it's politically impossible in many rich countries to get this money from the taxpayers, to get this money from the budget, because they are so indebted. I mean, one can argue about this, and we can create new funding streams and mechanisms, taxes on the uses and abuses of the global commons, on air travel, on currency speculation, on CO2 emissions, whatever. But that's going to take pretty long. And what we need now is to have to kickstart this process of drastic change, in speeding up the introduction of renewable energies, because every day we don't use them, they're wasted. And for that you probably need some new and innovative funding mechanisms, which should not preclude us continuing to fight for a tax on currency speculation or what all the other mechanisms we can conceive. The global commons also, which the media have been given free use of, our space. That again you can charge for. You can introduce many new ways to make sure that the people of the globe who own this global commons actually profit from it and are not damaged by it. Many ideas, but I think the main need now is to realize that we are not going to be saved by plans for 2050. When those now in charge, they have no way they can commit their successes in 2050. So basically such proposals are worthless. What we are need to talk about, is what will be done in 2010, 11, 12, up to 2015, within the next 10 years, because that's the sort of time frame where you can mobilize people with enthusiasm. We've seen that in the past. Anything beyond that is not really going to get people on board and people ready to make changes in their lives.
Are you heartened by what you see here coming together, the movements, the different... or no?
Well, it's a sort of difficult and challenging question, and I'm really not. I believe that one of the basic problems we have is a civil society which defines itself in a negative, non-governmental. I do not like to going around and defining myself as a negative. I believe that we need to have much more permeability, much more interchange between governments and non-governments. I tell people just as I think it's not very healthy for somebody to spend their lifelong career inside the political system, in government, in parliament. I also don't think it's very healthy to spend their lifelong career in the non-governmental sector. I've been in parliament just for one term, but it taught me a lot about how politics works, how overworked politicians are, that it's no good just coming and providing another lobby. They are faced with so many lobbyists. You need to provide them with a service. You need to say, how can I help you to make an impact? Because that's what they like to do. And that's what the World Future Council does. It holds hearings, it provides them with information, it helps them to improve the law, which after all is what they were elected for and what many politicians, many policymakers want to do. You just have to, know how that system works. And you also should go in there. There's no reason why we shouldn't become politicians, why we shouldn't join political parties, be part of the political debate, why we shouldn't even create new political parties, even on local issues, on regional issues. I did that once in Sweden on an important issue, together with the actress Bibi Andersson and one or two other friends. And, it had an impact. I always tell people the story of, the cradle of democracy, you know, in ancient Greece. The citizen who was involved in public life, who participated actively, was called a politis, and the one who refused to get involved was called an idiotus. And you know, today many people say, oh, you know, you must be an idiot to get involved in politics, and then people are stopped. Friends of mine who get involved in politics for very sort of idealistic reasons, they are then stopped by people who tell them, I used to admire you because they are quite well-known cultural personalities in Sweden, but now you've gone and become a politician. So there is a sort of cynicism that we need to overcome. We need to engage much more in the political realm, and we need to tell both these so-called NGOs, you know, both civil society activists and people from business, because they have the same cynicism towards politics, and they sort of believe that they can somehow get together, you know, business, big business, and these NGOs can get together and somehow rule the world. They don't need governments. And that's not just an illusion, it's completely silly, because if you don't have government setting the rules, then ultimately big business, because they have more money, are going to set the rules, and the civil society organizations are going to find that they're always going to be overruled in the end. And those people in business who tell me that, you know, government is a problem and not the solution, if they still believe that nonsense after, you know, the governments having saved them and saved the financial system, they should maybe look at a country like Somalia, you know, where there's no government, where there's anarchy. And you don't see many businessmen wanting to go and invest there. You don't see many people wanting to go and live in a country where there's no government. So for that reason, I think we need to rehabilitate, you know, democratic governance, and we need to get actively involved. We need to realize, yes, we need more leadership. We really need more leadership, but the leaders may be us. You know, we all need to take that responsibility. We need to learn public speaking. We need to look at what happened when communism fell in Eastern Europe. And many people like us, many people, whether they were teachers, you know, policemen, housewives, etc., they suddenly had to gather around round tables because their fellow citizens trusted them, and they asked them to take responsibility, to take power during the transition period. And that may now happen again, because our system is going, I think, the same way as the communist system went. It is losing credibility, and it may well collapse, and we're going to face major disruptions, and then all of us are going to be called not just to sit and demand things and visualize the world we'd like to live in, but work actually on the steps on how to get from here to there.